Vladimir Putin here. Do you have trouble communicating with your spouse or partner? In today's edition of This Authoritarian Life, world's most ruthless self-care podcast, President Xi and I will be modeling positive dialogue patterns that can save your relationship. Let's start with this. Trump is going to attack Iran.
Sure looks like it.
And I'm using I statement, I feel unsupported because you seem unwilling to do anything about it.
And I feel overburdened by the expectation that it's always my responsibility to rescue our friends, especially when you did nothing for Venezuela.
Well, that makes me feel defensive, especially since you are now repeating pattern of behavior with Cuba, where you are also doing nothing.
Well, I think the cycle of learned helplessness really began with you doing nothing for Syria.
I accept that. I think I just had no more emotional bandwidth left outside of my toxic enmeshment with Ukraine.
And I acknowledge that I have enabled that.
Thank you. I feel seen. So, are we helping Iran?
I just think boundaries are so important.
Boundaries, yes. Borders, no.
Somewhere in the bowels of the city that never sleeps,
Kevin McCullough, radio host with Salem Media,
is a man also not sleeping.
Syndicated radio talk show host Kevin McCullough.
And that guy would like a word with you.
Many of you know him as Nostradamus.
Of course that Kevin show is going to be great. The only thing that could be greater, of course, would be that Donald show. We don't have that, so we have that Kevin show.
Featuring the music of Dick Tunney and the Dream in Color Orchestra. Straight ahead, Chris Wilson from Eyes Over breaks down every aspect of that sad State of the Union. Soren Aldaco will talk about her lawsuit before the Texas Supreme Court. And Brenda Hefner from Heritage Foundation will take us on America 250 travel destination. Sketch comedy from the puppet regime, Al Berry and Nick Peterson. And it's Megan Wood back in the spotlight. And now, from Times Square, where staying seated during tributes to heroes has officially become a new Olympic sport for the left, here's Kevin! Yepper! Welcome to the weekend. Hold on. All right, here we go. Got a great show for you today, and I'm hopeful, friends, that you will remember when it comes time to vote a little bit later this year, just the level of analysis you got from that Kevin show, because we have got today one of the, I think it's going to be one of the best levels of analysis that have been done about how the people feel about the State of the Union in real time, what happened as people were watching it. How did they react on social media? What were all the people saying? Chris Wilson is here from a group called Eyes Over, and these guys, they are scary good. In fact, they're so good that the White House uses them to give them feedback on what people are saying on a daily basis. That's how good they are. So it's very interesting. Chris Wilson's going to be here a little bit later on. There's this huge lawsuit before the Texas Supreme Court that has to do with a girl who was conned into being told that she needed to become a boy, which you can't do. You can't actually change someone's sex. You can change their perception of themselves, but you can't change their actual sex. And turns out none of it was very good for her. They cut her breasts off and they put her on drugs and all kinds of stuff. And it turns out she's probably going to win a enormous amount of money. And what I'm hopeful is that will sting so badly that there will be many, many more of these lawsuits popping up all over the place, and we can finally put these heinous demons out of business that are involved in that stuff. It's just incredibly heinous. But Soren Aldaco is going to be with us in the second hour, and then a little bit later on, and we're gonna sprinkle this in for the next several weeks. Some of you know. Did you know? Do they know? They don't know. Okay, some of you know, some of you don't know. I write a little travel magazine called That Passport Life, and if you go to thatkevinshow.com, you can click on it. It's on the crossbar at the top. You just click on it. But every week we put out travel destinations. I love to write about travel, talk about travel, go on adventures in travel. And the idea that we've got the 250th anniversary of America coming up. Happy birthday, 250, just around the corner. I thought it would be kind of cool to start like revisiting some of the sites where our country was birthed. So I've rewatched the entire Ken Burns series on the founding of the country. Made a lot of my center-right friends mad because they say that's just leftist propaganda. And then some of my leftist friends think that it doesn't go far enough. It's probably okay to watch. But I learned a lot about the chess match, where Washington moved his, and then the Brits moved here, and then the French and the Indians, and everybody that got involved. It's a really, really good overview of all of that. And as I was coming through that, I realized there are so many destinations up and down the East Coast that I don't know that much about, that I would like to know more about. And so we're gonna highlight some of these. But the reason I bring it up here is because the Heritage Foundation has this really cool guide to historic sites that they've just put out. They only had they were with us 8 months ago. They only had 50 sites in it then. It's now up to 130 or so of places where you can go and actually understand the history better about them. But they also want you to do this. If they want you to, they rate the amount of historical good that you can learn from these. So today, Brenda Hefner is going to be back with us from Heritage. She went to Mount Pelier, James Madison's home. She went to Thomas Jefferson's Monticello, or as they say in Hamilton, Monticello, and then went to Mount Vernon, George Washington's home. She's going to give us kind of a comparison of each in terms of how accurate the history is and what's going to happen. And that should be kind of interesting, and I look forward to that. And then Megan Woods is in the spotlight, friends. She's been on our list in the new music arena for 3 years. She's only had a record out for like a year. That's because she put out one song literally in that whole first year, and it was such a big hit that she didn't need to do anything else. But anyway, that's happening. Hey, you've been hearing me talk about the Food for the Poor campaign that you're helping us with, and I want to say thank you. As of Friday afternoon, and those of you that are helping us on the radio side with my daily show as well, we have now fed or brought clean drinking water, or both actually, to more than 400 children in the month of February. More than 400 children in the month of February have been given a year's worth of food and will be given all the clean water that they can drink going forward. Now, sadly, they don't have it to put in. They don't have nice little That Kevin Show mugs to put it in, but we're working on that. But they've got all the clean drinking water that they can handle and enough food to feed them for the next year. That's 2 meals a day, which is 730 meals over the course of a year that they will receive. I think that's the correct math. I'll have to go back and look, but I think that's correct. Having said that, thank you. Thank you to those of you that are helping us. Now, the list of names that we have 720 children's names on it. So 400 gets us more than halfway. We're on the end of the tunnel is in sight, but we need everyone that can help us to help us. 855-907 4673, 855-907-4673, or go to thatkevinshow.com and click on the banner at the top of the page where you see it says Food for the Poor. We're going to feed these kids. We're going to make sure that they have plenty to eat and plenty to drink for the coming year with our friends at Food for the Poor. Love doing that. So the big story this week was the State of the Union. And it was the fact that Donald Trump made the Democrats look exceedingly foolish of their own doing. Now, he didn't know that the lines he was going to say were going to make them look so dumb. But what they had done was, and I really question this philosophy. You know the dollar store Obama, Hakeem Jeffries? Dollar store Obama says to everybody in the Democrat delegation, and why Leader Schumer over in the Senate and people would listen to him. I don't know, because Dollar Store Obama is about as serious as his nickname, Dollar Store Obama. But he's the Dollar Store Obama. He's telling everybody, no matter what, you sit on your hands. Don't you applaud for anything, except for the insider trading thing. We want everybody to think that we're really against insider trading, even though we've all made gads of money from it. We want to make sure we trick everybody on that. But on everything else that he says, no matter what it is, you just sit there. You don't clap. And so they ended up not clapping for puppies and heroes and disabled children and people that are innocent and crime victims and Americans, because the biggest thing of the night was when he says, stand with me if you agree that the first role of American government, the first rule of what they should be working for is the safety of Americans, not illegal aliens. And they all sat there. They all sat there. He later says we shouldn't be, mutilating children in surgeries, and we're going to ban the sex gender change thing. And then they sit there and he goes, these people are crazy. Friends, it was awful. We got some analysis of the State of the Union coming up next. Chris Wilson's going to be with us. Big show. Megan Woods is here. Don't go anywhere.
To that Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough.
Tonight I'm inviting every legislator to join with my administration in reaffirming a fundamental principle. If you agree with this statement, then stand up and show your support. The first duty of the American government is to protect American citizens, not illegal aliens.
And I don't know. I cannot explain it for the life of me. I cannot explain why a party who's not in office, in power, would sit on their hands through so many common sense points in the State of the Union. This was one of the least partisan State of the Unions I've ever heard, and yet it was the most partisanly responded to I've ever seen. Here to discuss is Chris Wilson. He's the CEO of an organization called Eyes Over, and it's kind of an inside baseball kind of organization that takes a look at political trends and social media and what's going on out there. And Chris, you've been very useful to a lot of people that are just trying to reach the American public with their messages, and I appreciate everything that you're doing. Yeah. Was it as shocking to you that you had a president that was as mainstream, down the middle, common sense, should have been easy to agree on a ton of stuff? I mean, Democrats are standing up when he says they're going to raise your taxes. They applauded themselves for saying that he's going for him saying they're going to raise his taxes. It was like they were on the opposite page of reason last night.
Yeah, what we saw last night wasn't really just a speech reaction per se. It was a measurable momentum event. And that's what Eyes Over is built to do. As you said, it is kind of insider baseball, but at the same time, I think it matters. We monitor sentiment and narrative velocity minute by minute. We monitor all online conversations. And so it is, one of the things we saw.
Were your radars going off like boom, boom, boom last night?
They were. Well, I'll tell you, within hours, President Trump's positive sentiment climbed to 47%, 9 points over his trailing 3-day average. And Republicans overall exited the speech with a 5.2 advantage in overall sentiment over Democrats, where they started dead even. And we post about all this on our Eyes Over _US X account. Okay. But the refusals to stand created immediate negative framing across the political spectrum. And the takeaway from that isn't just that Republicans like the speech. As you said, it was one of the most nonpartisan or bipartisan speeches probably in history, because you go back to one of the most partisan speeches ever was George Washington's whenever he did this. But it's the narrative pressure broke in Republicans' direction. And I think that's what matters going into the news cycle. And that's going to be the key thing that people are going to be talking about today.
I want to slow down to go fast because there were so many aspects of this speech that, and I'm based in New York, but I talk to 700 cities. I have a lot of friends that are African American clergy that are on my show all the time. We are right in the midst of rolling our sleeves up and trying to work across party lines here just to get common sense solutions for the most important city in the country. And I was seeing people last night, African Americans, that were angry at the fact that their party, and they disagree with them vehemently, is insisting upon voting against voter ID, for example, and using the excuse that we are incapable as a people, that brown people are incapable as a people of being able to get IDs. We're too dumb or ignorant or we just not capable of doing this stuff. When person after person on Instagram, many of my friends here in New York are like, that hasn't been true for years.
Yeah. And then you got Gavin Newsom going giving speeches, say, hey, I'm a 960 SAT, just like all you people. It's just the Democrat optic. They created real optics risks. And you think back last year, the most negative moment we measured in Trump's, it wasn't a State of the Union, but address to Congress, was whenever Democrats refused to stand for DJ Daniel. You remember the kid with brain cancer they gave a little hint to. And then they do it again this time. And then the disruptions, they amplify the negative cross-partisan framing. I mean, you're going to see so many clips of Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar yelling, and they just look like these crazy people. And so what the data showed immediately, and we were posting about this because the little lever wouldn't move fast enough for us, or we couldn't post fast enough to show it, is the at-risk indicators in Democrat-aligned streams were massive. And you know what's crazy about this, Kevin, is we do ingest Blue Sky also. So all the crazy people over on Blue Sky, they're like, oh, this is great. It was not enough to drown out every other online medium. And the real story here was the momentum. Social engagement overall was between, and it goes on and off and up and down throughout the night. It was 300 to 450% higher than prior State of the Unions. And we forecast positive speech sentiment pre-speech, and it materialized. And I'll tell you what, I'm just going to do a little plug here. You won't see this in traditional polling. And that's my background. I was named Pollster of the Year after the Glenn Youngkin race in 2021.
Yeah. Well,
I moved over to do this. And you won't see this captured for days, and it could be much longer. And so that's the value and the power of what we're doing, is measuring it all in real time.
So I've got some buddies they're in a football text thread. We were all in a small group together years ago, and we four of them are Giants fans. One of them's a Jets fan, a Cowboys fan, and so we just talk smack to each other all year. But last night they were fired up on this, and one of them goes, "This is too long. He's taking too long. I'm afraid that we're losing the audience." And I told him, I said, Joe, I have the opposite impression. I think that the American people are clued in. And I think they're shocked at what they're seeing. And I think that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think Trump generally gets better audiences anyway. I think people are just more entertained by him. Love him or hate him, I think you tune in to see what he has to say. And I just couldn't believe the kind of drop the curtain and let everything be seen as the sausage is being made kind of moments that they had. Even especially on the Charlotte story. And I want to remind people what that was about. When he addressed Mrs. Zarutska in the galley, her daughter was that scared little blonde girl from Ukraine that we all saw the viral video of, where she is sitting on that light rail and this absolute heinous thug murderer stands up. Not only does he knife her and she begins to die bleeding internally right there on the train, he then walks up and down the car saying, I got that witch. Only he didn't say he got that witch. He said something else. But this was
and white.
And this is the mom, and everybody in the room is seeing her tear up. And I think we were all very emotive with her. And you cut to the Democrats, and there's Ilhan Omar, there's Rashida Tlaib, there's there's Kelly from Arizona, and they're all sitting there stone-faced, like they couldn't care. And to me, like, if I'm managing a campaign, I'm going to make miles and miles of commercials out of this, because it really does reveal where their hearts were at.
It does. And I'll say there's 3 points I'd make about it. The first one is it reinforces a caricature. Now, it's a caricature that Trump was trying to make about Democrats. Republicans argue that they're reflexively oppositional and they just they don't care about Americans and they're only out trying to protect illegal immigrants. And most Democrats would argue that's untrue. But what they did last night reinforces that caricature, and sitting during those unity frame lines reinforces the narrative.
Kevin McCullough, glad to have you with us, Times Square. Yeah, I know, there's still a lot of snow on the ground, but we're going to plow through it anyway. No pun intended. And I have plenty of ID if I wanted to.
Give your ID.
But Mr. Mamdani would expect it. And you know, Trump was even on his game in that regard. When he did the throwaway line to the mayor of New York, he goes, yeah, he's a nice guy. He's wrong on policy, but he's a nice guy. That's what moderates want to see. They want to see someone who's amiable, someone who's able to talk to the person across the aisle, but not hate-filled. And going back, Chris Wilson, to from Eyes Over, when we're talking about healthcare policy, when we're talking about taxes, when we're talking about the increase in production, U.S. production across the board, the number of factories that are coming here and building new facilities and the new jobs that are coming with it, they still want to float out this word affordability that seemed to not even be in their vocabulary when Joe Biden was in office. How did he do on those kitchen table issues last night in terms of the language that he used, how he approached it, and what you saw happening on social media?
Well, I'll talk about it from a quantitative standpoint. His comments, the president's comments on the border, there were three areas: the border, affordability, and national identity, had a 70% supportive sentiment across partisan lines.
Wow.
You know, that's really how you expand beyond your base. And I would say that's something that every Republican running for office in 2026 needs to take from this.
That's your blueprint, if you're right.
It absolutely is. Double down on border, affordability, national identity. Those are emotional drivers. And then I think you also have to lean into the cross-aisle populist items like banning congressional stock trading. That was a big deal too. It still wasn't at that same level. And it was, you know, the key thing is here is Trump just controlled the narrative window. It's different than winning an election, if you will. But
he's a different speech giver than he was 6 years ago.
That's no question about it. And controlling that narrative window repeatedly is how you build durable momentum. And last night he did that. And so, you know, what we'll see over the next few weeks is, does the momentum that we measured last night and continues into this morning? We posted this morning that we see the numbers continuing to go up. That it is, if he's able to continue that and, you know, doesn't do a Rob Reiner tweet or something like that, then he's got a lot of progress there. And the other thing I'd say is, you know, when you look at a 2026, because that's really what this gets down to is the midterm elections, right? Is you've got to be concerned about swing voters and moderates. And it's not that moderates suddenly embrace every policy that Donald Trump got up there and talked about. But what resonated from what he did that we measured was his tone, with the symbolism. I mean, the brilliance of continually pointing out people in the audience or pointing out people in the gallery that he was able to point to. And we haven't even talked about the hockey team yet. But the symbolism and then the contrast with Democrats staying on their hands. And when the president framed moments around citizens, around families, around public safety, and then to get back to that key point, and then ask members to stand if they agree. Moderates aren't evaluating legislative language here. They're evaluating participation. And the visible refusal becomes the story coming out of this.
Yeah. Now, from my very non-political friends, as I'm hearing from people last night, real time, I felt that was exactly what they were seeing. And, you know, it's one thing to say, well, Charlie Kirk's widow, you know, Charlie was one of his guys. They're going to sit on their hands against Erica. That's understandable. But for a Coast Guard guy who saves 138 kids' lives swimming in the waters to get them, and they sit on their hands for that.
Right.
To talk about the young girl who thought they was going to be paralyzed and never be able to have any kind of life. Who, by the way, comes from a family of color and is not a white suburban girl, and she's there and she's smiling and she's waving, and they sit on their hands for that. And then for the girl that gets stabbed on the light rail and her parents are there and they're weeping and they sit on their hands for it's just like it would be one thing if it was just one moment, but they stacked their opportunity to look foolish over and over and over again.
Yeah, they did. And all that is exactly right. But I'm going to the thing that I want to point out is patriotism is across partisan. It's bipartisan. And
should be. That's the way it used to be.
Yeah. Well, it is with voters. It may not be with elected officials, and the Democratic Party has moved so far to the left.
Well, Quinnipiac did a poll this week where they said that if you're a Democrat, you're more likely to say to a pollster now, I'm not cheering for the Olympic team if Trump is my president. And this is the first time in history anybody's said something like that.
It's crazy. It's with the Huffington Post article right after the hockey team won. If you don't want to yell USA or wave a flag, you're not alone. But the hockey tribute and the family segments were important from a representative standpoint. Those moments, they triggered base consolidation for Republicans, no question. But they also triggered a positivity and non-ideological conversation streams. And that's what the cool thing is. Whenever we're looking at the eyes over data, we can look at it with conservatives. We can look at the streams from all the different universes. We see the blue sky pump in there. And moderates are more culturally traditional than activists on either side.
Mm-hmm. Stick around for more of That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough. Kevin McCullough.
Fascinating discussion with Chris Wilson, CEO of Eyes Over, and you can follow them on X at EyesOver_X.
US.
To find
_US.
I'm sorry, _US. Eyes Over _US on X, and follow them today. Chris, we've talked a lot about the emotion, and my favorite part even was when he was saying, we're going to ban genital mutilation surgeries on children, and I think the whole country, especially every father of every daughter that's in the country, stood up and said, yeah, no more boys in my girls' locker room.
Right.
And he looks over. And what I loved about what he did, and it couldn't have been rehearsed, he was genuinely amazed that these people could not get behind even the most basic middle of the road positions on things. And at that point he goes, these people are crazy. And then he goes on with his speech, because everyone's thinking that,
right.
he is the American everyday guy in how he processes what's going on. And he's just so amazed at these people being so hardcore. But that was the emotional part of the speech, and I thought he was a master of that. You've already kind of covered that. He did get into some meat and potatoes political policy issues. He's defending his tariffs. He's saying that his foreign policy has stopped wars. He's very focused on the things that he got elected for, especially removing criminal aliens out of the culture. He is saying that he's on the right path. He is saying that the help for the economy and everything else is on the way. How did those meat and potatoes moments of the speech resonate?
So it was not uniform, and but there are some clear patterns. So tariff and national security, very strong with Republicans, consolidated Republican support. And I would say it produced what I would call strong identity alignment. So that was kind of like you had those sides going back and forth at each other. Healthcare was more mixed, but interestingly, populist elements like lowering prescription drug prices. And also, it was at about the same time, so it's kind of mixed into it in my reports here that I'm looking at. But banning congressional stock trading, that generated cross-partisan support. So lowering prescription drugs and...
he seems surprised by that, by the way. He even called out Nancy Pelosi.
I loved it. It's like...
What's your thinking behind that? Why did the Democrats support that? Applause.
Well, because she's the greatest stock trader in history. She makes Warren Buffett look like you and me. It's crazy. It is. If you go and look at her stock portfolio, she is truly the greatest.
I was surprised they cheered for him on that because I thought that was all going to be a hit to their investments.
Yeah. Well, yeah, It may be, but that doesn't stop from cheering. So I'd say the takeaway is that sovereignty and fairness language resonate. Redistribution language, maybe not so much. But, on the tariffs, importantly, when it's tied to America first, domestic manufacturing, economic sovereignty, those are the language that produce strong positive alignment. It's not about policy. It's not about numbers. And engagement was high, especially when it was framed around protecting American workers. And I think that's what we tend to get away from as Republicans. We talk more about, GDP and inflation is at 0.9 when it should be at 0.8. That kind of stuff.
Nobody cares about that.
Yeah, if we make it about American workers, people care. And it's, last time you had Tim Cook, I think, in the audience where he said, look at Apple's bringing plants back. And I guess now is it the Mac Mini they're going to bring back and build here in the U.S. or whatever, I can't remember. But nonetheless, it's just those are the kind of things that he's got to do better at, because when he mentions those, or Republicans really, when he mentions them, numbers spike. And then the opposition reaction was sharp but predictable. He mentioned Kelly. It's focused on inflation and trade retaliation risks, and those are the things that when the Democrats bring that up, it does bring the numbers back down. But what's important here is moderates. So let me talk about them, swing voters. They didn't respond to tariffs as a technical economic instrument. They respond to protection of American jobs, fair trade framing, and then standing up to China.
So they were understanding it the way he was talking about it.
Whenever those language is used. I mean, you can literally see it, Kevin, in real time. When a certain word is used, the language pop, or the number, you can see the chart pop. So when tariffs are framed as protecting American workers and confronting China, reaction skews very positive.
I have to think that, and he had lots of that kind of moment last night, but I have to think that plays really well in Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Indiana, where all of these jobs were just hollowed out because we weren't playing tough with our opponents. And, some of these countries, we were literally letting them come in for free, and they were spiking us in the back like you wouldn't believe. And so for him to talk about that inequity, I have to think that particularly for those swing states, that resonates to all those factory households.
It does, but sovereignty framing matters more than mechanics.
Oh, wow.
One thing I want to we need to keep in mind as we message on it, because even in those households, they still want America to win. And that's kind of where it gets down to. And if they think it is us versus China, which is the president's done a masterful job in sort of framing that contest, it's not Giants versus Cowboys here. It's U.S. versus China. Those things matter, and that's what causes it to spike.
What about on other economic issues? Was there anything that he did poorly on?
Poorly on economics. Nothing popped in terms. I mean, the challenge when you have so much positivity, it's kind of like,
no, that's
it's like if you win a game by 50 points, you forget the turnover that happened in the third.
Let me move to the continuation of the immigration policy and the removal of criminal aliens from the U.S. big cities, because that was obviously something that people took a shot at afterwards. But I really, again, think that he was right on the money with where the American heart was on that.
Yeah. Strong engagement across what I call the swing aligned clusters. And it was very emotionally charged. And I'd frame it as national security, probably more than immigration, because that's where we sort of cluster it under.
Right.
And it's framed around strength.
Law enforcement, maybe?
Yeah. Deterrence, border control, that drove very strong positive engagement. It was one of the speeches, what I would call most stable pillars in terms of driving momentum.
And that was true in Democrat and moderate circles as well?
I would say moderate to moderate Democrat, if there are any of those left. Yeah.
Well, people like my grandparents who did not vote for sex changes or abortions or anything like that. They voted for welfare back in the day because they just wanted their friends to be okay if they needed help. It's a completely different Wild West when it comes to what the Democratic Party is. Okay, top 2 takeaways for candidates running for office this fall, particularly for Congress, because that's where the whole ball of wax is going to come down to.
Double down on border, affordability, and national identity. And I know that's 3, but could maybe put 2 of them together.
Go harder on those messages and say we're going to.
They're the emotional drivers.
We're going to finish the Trump agenda.
The populist items like banning congressional stock trading. That I think I said that earlier, but it had nearly 70% support across partisan lines.
Stick around for more of That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough.
Donald, quit trying to stop the slightly less than peaceful riots in Los Angeles. Sending the military because people are looting stores, burning buildings, and blowing up cars makes you a fascist tyrant.
Gavin, you should be thanking me for cleaning up your mess. California's basically a third world country. I'm thinking of renaming it to Gay Cambodia.
Oh, here we go again. America's keyboard warrior making it seem like I don't care about Californians. Well, for my $9 million home, I have no problems. And if that doesn't convince you, I brought Selena Gomez to help me. Donald, you're hurting my people. All they're doing is looting stores and setting cars on fire. They haven't done anything to deserve being deported. Oh, my people.
Gavin, whether you like it or not, the funniest thing I could have possibly done is send the military to handle the riots.
Donald, if you don't stop making it seem like I'm not doing my job, I'll sue you.
So your plan to handle the riots is to sue me for handling the riots.
That's right. And since you refuse to make it seem like I'm doing my job in any meaningful way, I have no choice but to call someone else for aid. Los Angeles needs your help.
Sorry, Gavin. I've been kidnapped by Israeli military forces. They're holding me hostage in my home in Sweden. They said I'm only allowed to leave whenever I want to. As soon as I can, I'll try to bring as much aid to Los Angeles as I brought to Gaza. 3 bags of pretzels and a bottle of Tylenol.
Thanks, Greta. Donald, get ready to see what real humanitarian aid that makes me look good is.
Somewhere in the bowels of the city that never sleeps,
Kevin McCullough, radio host with Salem Media,
is a man also not sleeping.
Syndicated radio talk show host Kevin McCullough.
And that guy would like a word with you.
Many of you know him as votes for Damas.
Of course that Kevin show is going to be great. The only thing that could be greater, of course, would be that Donald show. We don't have that, so we have that Kevin show.
Featuring the music of Dick Tunney and the Dream in Color Orchestra. Still to come, Soren Aldaco talks lawsuits in the Texas Supreme Court. Brenda Hefner previews America 250 and travel destinations related. Sketch comedy from Al Berry and Nick Peterson. And back in the spotlight, songstress Megan Woods. And now from Times Square, where applauding American success is optional, but partisan pouting is mandatory. Here's
For Assignment Desk Weekend, I'm Kevin McCullough. This week in the You Can't Make It Up closed-door depositions featuring Bill and Hillary Clinton, reportedly answering questions no one asked, like what if amnesia had a power couple? Congresswoman Nancy Mace says Hillary erupted during questioning about Jeffrey Epstein, which is shocking because historically the Clintons are known for their soft-spoken whisper diplomacy. Meanwhile, former President Bill Clinton testified he had no idea about Epstein's crimes, proving once again that ignorance isn't just bliss, it's apparently a long-term memory care plan. In Washington, Democrats were confronted for staying seated during President Trump's call to put Americans first. Critics say they refuse to stand for law enforcement, children, puppies, and insiders insist they were simply waiting for a bipartisan moment, which is tentatively scheduled for 2047. Over at Scouting America, the organization formerly known for knots and campfires has agreed to 5 changes under Pentagon pressure. Merit badges now include advanced apology and wilderness sensitivity training. S'mores remains under review. CNN staffers are reportedly bracing for a potential Paramount takeover, describing the mood as horrific. Sources say employees fear being forced to cover both sides of a story. In Illinois, one city began paying $25,000 in reparations to qualifying black residents and is now reportedly searching couch cushions for funding. A family exposed insanely expensive airport pizza this last week. TSA confirmed the slices cost $19, but do include complimentary regret. In entertainment news, Kristen Stewart delivered what critics are calling a word salad about Los Angeles and ICE. Somewhere a thesaurus has filed a restraining order. For Assignment Desk Weekend, I'm Calvin McCullough.
So, guys, I was going to wait on a few more people to join, but hey, Thomas, Priscilla, is the storm hitting you? Yes. Whoops. Didn't need to do that. There we go. Yes, storm is hitting us, and I'll probably lose reception from it. Doesn't help that I have Spirit Wireless either. As reliable on Earth as it is in heaven, my butt. Are you traveling again? I am. I am on a trip bound for Rome. And what? I am not getting deported. I'm being transported. Big difference. Okay. Martha, the host, thank you. Details aren't important. How do you even know that? We just left Crete, Greece. We are headed to Rome, where I will be appealing my conviction to Nero, as is my right as a Roman citizen. So, see you soon. All right. Don't love that. Rome traveled? No, I won't need a guide. My itinerary is already set by other people, unfortunately. So, thank you. You should go to Santorini. I hear good things. I don't know that we'll have time this trip. Have you been to the beach clubs in Mykonos? Okay, so I think there's some confusion. My trips are more mission-based and less sightseeing and partying. I'm preaching Christ, not pounding Cristal. So this trip is a little different, though, as Martha so kindly continues to point out. Bro, why you arrested? I thought you make lawn chair. Okay, so it's tents. I'm a tent maker, actually. Thank you, but I'll just be under house arrest when we get there, so it's all good. I know some of you have been asking about my tents, though, so click the link in my bio if you want one, and use code BetterCallPaul for free shipping. I make them all by hand from animal skins. So, thank you, Uncle Festus. Dude spends more time in a cell than a nucleus. You are not wrong, but Jesus said, "Blessed are you when people persecute you because of me. Rejoice and be glad. Great is your reward in heaven." Shut up, PETA. Do you have any friends? As a matter of fact, I do. I did. Yeah. I have a friend named Barnabas. And we actually kind of went our separate ways, though, after a disagreement. He wanted to take this guy named John Mark on our trip, and I didn't, because honestly, the guy's kind of he's flaky. And John Mark, what's up, my brother? Okay, treat yourself as were you one of Jesus' apostles. Well, so what is an apostle, really, right? I work more on the international side of things, and anyone who's on a mission could actually technically be considered an apostle by definition. But no, I wasn't. No. Didn't you kill Christians, hypocrite? I did, and you're next if you don't stop. No, that's not true. I changed, and if God can change me, He can change anyone. And that's the message that I'm writing to the churches of the Philippians, the Galatians, the Hebrews in Rome. And I tell you what, if they hang on to their copies, we'll put them all together and you can read them later too. I got robbed in the Philippines. I think you're thinking Philippines. The Philippians are the people of Philippi, Greece. You'll also get robbed there. All right, looks like that's all the questions. Hey, don't forget to like and share so we can spread the gospel further. And one more, if you could eat one last meal. Oh, okay, all right, that's...
Imagined by Mercy Me, one of the most beloved songs of all time.
You inspired millions of people. I mean, what did you think was going to happen? You're just going to ride off into the sunset? No more struggles or pain. So how about you tell me what's really going on? All these years later, seems we find ourselves at the crossroads.
They say sometimes you win some.
The question is,
sometimes you lose some.
Are we still headlining material?
You got another hit cooking?
This tour is your dream. It's our dream. I'm Tim. I'm Bart's warm-up. This is my first tour, you know? It's my first tour, too.
When did accountant Bart show up?
I don't know, man. About the time I invited my diabetic kid along on this writer's block-inducing make-or-break tour. Worried I might break him.
Or he just might fix you.
I just want to write something that helps people. Through the pain we all go through, you will never understand what I'm going through. Gratitude. Grief. Finding a way to hold them both. God is in fire. And it is beautiful. This song needs you.
Ready or not, we'll be right back. That Kevin. Now, back to That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough.
Welcome back to Times Square. It's Kevin McCullough, That Kevin Show. So glad to have you with us. You know that every week I purposefully, proactively, not at the impetus of anybody else, just my own conviction, feel like it's important to highlight the work of what IWF is doing, the Independent Women's Forum, and their subsidiaries, Independent Women's Voice, Independent Women's Features, all of the groups that are coming from there and what they're doing. But there was probably no issue that we talked about more in the 2024 run-up to the election than what has happened to young people in this area of gender confusion. And when it comes to telling the truth about gender ideology and what it's done to young people, there is no group on the planet that has documented this better, nor tracked the real life stories of people that have been impacted by it the way Independent Women's Forum has. And so along those lines, I am very pleased to welcome Soren Aldaco to the broadcast. And Soren is someone who is detransitioning, and we're going to get into her story and where it all took place. Soren, thank you for taking time out to be with us. I'm very grateful.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin.
We were talking before we went on the air. How old were you when you started being confused about gender, and how did the confusion about what you thought you wanted or what you were being, I don't know, suggested, how did it come into your life?
I was 11 when I first was introduced to the idea of transgender identity. I was spending a lot of time on the internet, and up until that point, I was very much tomboy. I played softball, I was a catcher, my coach called me Dirt Baby, and I think 10 years before, tomboy would have been enough, but in this modern online landscape, I was introduced to the idea that if I felt not like other girls, if I preferred traditionally boy things, that I might just actually be a boy trapped in a girl's body. So that was what I ran into at 11, and it was very attractive to me.
Can I just park on that idea for a second, because there's a lot of aspects to your story that I want to unfold, but this is one of those things that I don't think a lot of mainstream folks understand. The power of suggestion is so strong. And again, in the days of Laura Ingalls Wilder, who was often referred to herself in her own writings as someone who had tomboyish proclivities. She was fast, and she loved to race the boys, and she loved to beat them in stickball. And there were other things that she could do that were very athletic and very powerful and very strong. But she was not confused about her role eventually as a woman, as a mom, and as someone who would go on to be a school teacher. And so, in other words, it was okay to be a woman who had these gifts and abilities. And I'm curious about this power transition, because you mentioned in this day that we live in the era that we're in, and in the power of the internet, and how a lot of times I think these powers of suggestions happen in kind of one-on-one or one-on-zero type of settings where you're being influenced by people online or things you're seeing online. Can you dig into that for a second for us?
Absolutely. I actually want to zoom in on a phrase you used, power of transition, right? I think for most of human history, we've had rites of passage. We've had rituals that have helped us cross that threshold from girlhood into womanhood and boyhood into manhood. And I don't really know where those have gone. I know that I was talking to my husband about this very recently, that, a lot of the boys and men feel very aimless in adolescence now because, how do you be a man in today's age? And I think on the internet, where everything is disembodied, when you take into consideration that a lot of those rites of passage are embodied because sexual maturation, puberty is embodied, it's really easy to feel just afloat and ungrounded in becoming an adult.
Well, and that's particularly confusing when you add then in a culture two elements that I think are very important. The rejection of a higher moral code or God, as many people would understand it to be, and kind of a created design, if you will, to who men and women are and why we are completely equal in God's eyes and we should be in society's eyes. But we are very distinct. There are very much distinctions about who we are, even though the equality is guaranteed. But then you add on top of that kind of this crazed, I don't know, sexual anarchy that wants to call everything that's day, night, and night, day, and up, down, and black, white, and back and forth. It just seems like you have so much pushing back against what seems to be established order that I think for centuries we didn't even question it. The sun's going to come up tomorrow. I know that's going to happen. Why? Because it's happened a million years in a row. That's the thing. And yet there's this desire to undo all of that. And when you couple that with the tomboyishness or the athleticism or the other things that for some reason people confuse as being, not feminine or not female, all of a sudden you've opened a heart and a mind that I think is very much impacted by the power of suggestion.
Yeah, it's a great point.
Was that the case for you?
I would say, yeah. I feel like I was very vulnerable to the power of suggestion, and especially more so than your average adolescent who's already pretty vulnerable, right?
Right.
In part because of that divorce from nature. I know that for me, I had a really hard time with the megachurch that I grew up in. And that was actually there was a scandal recently, and I looked back and just thought, okay, wow, I think not having a really central idea of who God was definitely a component, right? But then also thinking about that technological piece, one of the things I have focused on in my personal studies is the proliferation of blue light, right, where there wouldn't have been previously. So even just taking us out of our circadian rhythms, you said just a moment ago, the idea that the sun would come up tomorrow was something we never even questioned, but now we kind of have suns in our pockets. So I think that there's two components there, but I guess really they're one and the same because of that natural order that God created. It's a continuing
to push back against created or natural order, and everything that's in us was designed to cooperate with created and natural order. So thank you for digging deep on that for a second, because I think that's where a lot of people get confused. Like, how do kids so young become impacted by something that seems so relatively mature for their understanding and beyond kind of where they're at? I've got a 10-year-old daughter right now. I've got a 13-year-old son right now. I don't think either of them are confused about who they are, but they live in a house where the mother and father love each other. We go to church. We acknowledge God. We try to obey the laws of man and of the world around us. And like there's a general sense of order to their life. What about that for you? Were there other elements that were isolating you and that were keeping you from like a healthy kind of sense of who you were?
Yeah, I think that the devolution of my family unit played a role. And, my mom tried very hard once she was pregnant with me to make contact with my dad, but he was very evasive, and I ended up not meeting him until I was 15. And up until I met him, I was raised in part by my stepdad, who is pretty profoundly disabled, had a spinal injury. And so I didn't really have that cohesion that I think is essential to a young person's health and maybe preventing some of that particular vulnerability.
Very glad to have you with us, Kevin McCullough. Grateful to be with you. That Kevin Show, thatkevinshow.com, including the podcast, if you want to re-listen to any part of our discussion with Soren Aldaco, who is with the Independent Women's Forum. And she has an ongoing lawsuit that has just been heard by the Texas Supreme Court earlier this month, and they're awaiting a decision on this. Soren went down the path of exploring gender ideology and perhaps trying to change her sex when she was as young as 11, and that continued. Soren, take us to the next part of your story, because it gets a little bit more mature and a lot more traumatic, I think, beyond your teen years.
Yeah, well, moving forward from those experiences on the internet when I was very young, I think the transgender identity was a role play identity for a while. It was something that I played with my friends at school, in addition to the ones on the internet. And that was true for about until I was 15 years old, at which point a medical provider at an inpatient psychiatric facility pressured me to come out to him and told my family that all of my issues were because I was trans. That was a pretty big moment in my life. It was the first time I met my biological father. Things came to a head with my stepdad, who was disabled, and my mom, who worked all the time. And for the next couple of years, my dad and my stepmom, much to my mom and my stepdad's chagrin, were taking me to a transgender support group, for lack of a better word, where there was a nurse practitioner who would eventually prescribe me testosterone at 17. And then by age 19, I went under the knife in a double mastectomy that would go completely horribly wrong.
In what way? Beyond just the removal of the tissue?
Yeah, beyond just the removal of my healthy tissue, I had massive hematoma, so just terrible bruising. And on top of that, the bruising wasn't going away. It was continuing to get worse. I had some abdominal bleeding. And when I went to my surgeons with this issue, they just sort of shrugged me off. They told me nothing was wrong, things should be getting better, as if I wasn't explicitly telling them that things were getting worse. And I ended up having to seek alternative care at a local ER, where they reopened my wounds and sewed in drains that I had to manually express a couple times a day.
Well, I'm sorry for all of that pain. You made reference in our last segment that you are now married.
Yes.
And so at some point you decided you were not a boy and that you actually did want a traditional kind of way of life. That turns out to be the case, we're finding out, in many situations by kids who have had similar experience to yours, where they've had, quote, professional psychiatric people tell them that they need to do the things that you were told, and that are turning out to just not be for them. What is the prospect of your family planning? What do you hope to do? What can you do medically? Like, help us understand the exact toll this has taken on you.
When I first detransitioned, I actually, in part, did it medically before I did it ideologically, because of the toll it was taking on my body. I was on over 10 different medications at age 19, and I was seeing all these different specialists just to manage the side effects of the testosterone. So I went off the testosterone, and that came shortly after I had a gynecologist sort of try and pressure me into getting a gender-affirming hysterectomy. And at that point, I guess that just really hit me like a brick, and I went, wow, okay, maybe some of these doctors, like the ones who mishandled my mastectomy complications, are in this for the wrong reasons. Like, they seem almost eager to operate. And today when I think about my future family, there's a lot that's still unknown. I like to think of myself as someone who's pretty positive. I'm pretty realistic these days. I have, a lot of faith, and so I feel good that my life will go in a positive direction, but I don't know the medical consequences. I still have systematic issues. I have a thyroid disorder caused by the testosterone, we think, that isn't going to go away. And so there's a lot to be to just be, I guess, cautious about in these coming years.
Well, the incredible J.K. Rowling, who wrote Harry Potter, has been on record in recent weeks saying that until the American psychiatric medical community gets put on notice by large litigative settlements that they're going to have to come to, that they're not going to learn their lesson. They have learned this seemingly in the UK and some other places where having to pay for the mistakes and dearly in large sums is actually changing the tide. But is that your opinion here in the U.S. as well? Because even with President Trump using executive orders and sort of as best he can in the rule of law, moving things away from this, it appears that you said people are eager. It seems like there are people that are almost giddy to push this onto kids, even though much of the truth is starting to come out.
Stick around for more of That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough. From New York, That Kevin McCullough.
Welcome back. It's That Kevin Show, thatkevinshow.com. Thankful to have you with us as we are wanting to every single week bring you interesting tidbits of entertainment and things that you can do for your family that are safe, but also instructional and helpful for them to understand. I don't know about how other families have endured some of the snow days, but we've taken the opportunity to, watch some historical movies, have some discussions with the kids when we're all snowed in under 45 inches of whatever we have on the lawn. And this summer, I'm hopeful that we'll be able to take advantage of some of what my next guest is offering. She was with us just a few months ago talking about the Heritage Foundation's Guide to Historic Sites. Brenda Hefner is her name, and she rejoins us. Brenda, it's good to see you again. Happy 2026, by the way. I don't think I've seen you since the new year kicked over.
That's right. Happy birthday, America.
250. And in celebration of that, I think the last time we spoke, you had less than 50 sites as part of the guide, but now you're closing in on 130. That's pretty incredible.
Thank you. Yes, we're very proud of this project. So the Heritage Guide to Historic Sites pinpoints historic sites all across the country. Now there's at least one in every state, so hopefully families and citizens will be able to find a site within driving distance of where they live. And the guide pinpoints those sites. They're all significant, and then also grades them, A, B, or C, based on historical accuracy, proportionality, and ideological bias.
Yeah, I want to get into that because when we talked last time, that was the most fascinating thing that we discussed. For people that didn't hear that conversation, go back to the rationale, the basis, the reason that this guide needed to exist was what?
Sure. So a few years ago, I wrote a report on Mount Vernon, Monticello, and Montpelier called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, with Mount Vernon being the good, Monticello the bad, and Montpelier the ugly. And it showed that some of our historic sites are straying. Right at this point, if you go to Montpelier, there are no exhibits dedicated to James Madison and his accomplishments. So they're really moving sometimes.
What are they dedicated to?
There are two videos in the visitor center that you learn a little bit about Madison and you learn a little bit about him on the tour. But all the exhibits, except for one that's like an archaeological one, is on slavery and Jim Crow. And the only exhibit for children is intended to teach children not about the Constitution or the Bill of Rights, which Madison, of course, wrote, but to engage them with conversations on race and slavery. And one of the ways they say to do that is through children's books, and one of them includes imagination exercises that teaches children to imagine themselves not as the victim, but as the aggressor, quote, whipping an individual until his flesh cried blood. And this is accompanied with a picture of a man hanging with his back bloodied from whip marks. So that's
in the children's book.
Yes, that's in a children's book. I believe that one's for about fourth graders.
Wow. Okay, so Montpelier is as bad as it gets. What's the next one up?
I would say Monticello is a mixed bag. They have a lot of good stuff on offer, but my main issue is there's not very much on Thomas Jefferson and his accomplishments. They have some smaller exhibits at the base of the mountain, which are really about him as an inventor and building of Monticello, but the exhibit that they have on the Declaration is very lackluster, I would say. It's just a copy of the Declaration and a few trivia questions, nothing about the remarkableness about that document and what it means, and then very little on Thomas Jefferson's political accomplishments, which is really what we know him for, right? He was author of the Bill of Rights. He built Virginia along with Madison. He was president, vice president, secretary of state, right? He did quite a lot for this country.
And the best one of the three?
Mount Vernon is the best. So Mount Vernon gives ample attention to George Washington and his accomplishments. They have an entire museum dedicated to him, and it takes through his life and political accomplishments. They talk about that during the tour, and they are very careful and pay attention to primary source documents.
Wow.
Right? And they're very even-toned. They incorporate slavery as they should, but in a very even-toned, matter-of-fact matter of, this is part of the American story, we're going to talk about it, and we're going to cover all these things.
And the point in creating this report was that you were showing the disparity in the sites, and you discovered that these disparities occurred in many more places.
Correct. So I would say we're at a crossroads with our historic sites. They're not fully lost, but they are moving in a concerning direction. So other places, Montpelier produced a rubric, what they call, a set of guidelines for how to teach slavery and how to engage descendants communities. And this is a way that they think that descendants should be on the board. But if you look at how they define descendants, it's anyone who feels connected to the institution, whether or not they actually have a genealogical connection. And they say that it's not enough to simply talk about slavery. You also have to talk about institutional racism and those sorts of things. So you have to engage in those activist kind of modern conversations. And those guidelines are starting to be adopted at other places. They've been adopted at John Dickinson's home, and as well as Colonial Williamsburg has adopted them in some capacity.
This could really bias the viewpoint of people learning about the history of the country if they don't have some sort of balance to it to understand it. So the purpose of the guide is to provide that balance, or it's to just point out the bias?
I would say there are two main goals. So one is to encourage folks to go to these places to celebrate America 250, right? Civic education doesn't just happen in the classroom.
Yeah.
This is one of the things that American families do together with grandparents, parents, and children. It's how we relearn our history. And these are the places where history really happened. Yeah. So please go to them to learn. So that's very positive. A lot of the more local state places are still doing a very good job. So that's one goal. The other goal is to bring third-party accountability to the museum and historic site space, where we have sent people who know this particular era and aspect of history to these places and said, these things are off, because sometimes these places are quite sneaky in their historical distortion.
Stick around for more of That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough.